All right, we are going live here. Seconds after I set up my computer to do this, a little bit faster than usual. Usually I have a few more minutes to prepare. Just had some stuff come up with work right before this, so I needed to take care of that. Welcome. Thanks for joining the live stream. Have a lot of exciting things to talk about today. And also want to get to your questions, just pulling up some things from my agenda. The first one is Apple Vision Pro apps. So there's a handful of different apps that I've been finding really interesting and useful. I guess useful is not the right word, entertaining. Although I do still think of the Vision Pro as more of a work device, at least for me personally. I also think that a lot of people are considering the platform like done for, or just not, not fully what they had hoped. And I think it's still too early to really judge the platform as a whole. We haven't really seen something in technology like we have today with modern day Apple, where there's a company that has such scale in hardware development and talent around hardware and a super robust supply chain for hardware, where they can defy a lot of the common laws around shipping hardware that other companies over the decades have had to abide by. And, I think it kind of goes in line with what I think it was Greg Joswiak said about the Vision Pro on Apple Vision Pro on launch, which was something to the effect of like they reached into the future and grabbed this product, or that it felt like that. And I think that's an accurate idea, where this product, we are getting this product probably years ahead of when we would get an equivalent product in an alternate timeline where Apple isn't as big and as powerful as they are today, in an alternate universe. So I just think that the software and services side of Apple Vision Pro just isn't there right now, or that kind of device isn't there in time for Apple Vision Pro, even though I think it's a great product and I think it makes sense why Apple made it. And at this time, I mean, it's, there's a lot of, I think, already compelling use cases, at least enough for certain people. But I think for it to really catch on as something that a lot more people want and grow to a bigger market, there needs to be more use cases. But it's going to be months, if not years, before we really start to see that. There is sort of the chicken and the egg problem of like, maybe Apple sees tepid sales of this device and then they just don't invest enough money or time into actually making it what it could be from a software and services side, or getting their partners and other companies to do the same. And so then it ends up being down the road another company who takes over the VR space because Apple didn't put enough effort into it. I don't think that'll be the case, but you could see a reality where that happens. But I've really been enjoying some various sports apps. There's the I don't really have good visuals to pull up on this. I should have recorded screen recordings of these, but the Masters app, if you have Apple Vision Pro, check that out. It's been, at least for yesterday when I was checking out, it was free to watch the games without a cable subscription, or the golf players, playing holes. You can tell how much I'm into golf. I've watched Full Swing on Netflix, but that's the extent of my golf interests. But it was really cool because you can see a 3D version of the hole that they're playing and where their ball is traveling along that. It's a little bit delayed from the actual event of where the ball is, but it's still gives you a really cool visual understanding of where the ball is. There's also, I've been playing with, the MLB app has a similar sort of, two different 3D visualizations where you have a full life-size version of the strike zone, so you can see where the ball hits as you're also watching the game, where the ball lands within the strike zone for a particular pitch, and see the live view of the game as well. And then there's also Vroom, which is an app in beta for Formula One that gives you a three-dimensional version of the track layout, and you can see the different cars on the track. That Formula One's a sport that I'm more actively into following. And I think, for any of these sports, it makes a lot of sense to add this visual component that is hard to otherwise see on TV. Occasionally like Formula One, they'll add in, visuals of the track map in various places, but it's not the same as always having it up in 3 dimensions sitting in front of you. Another one that I felt was kind of interesting is J.Crew, where I think J.Crew's kind of experimenting with this idea where you can you're standing outside of, I think it's their New York City store, and you can see a person in 3 dimensions and change their outfit to whatever you want. And then you can also go through and purchase clothes through their app. It's a separate app from their standard J.Crew app, but it is a cool idea in terms of it kind of mimics seeing clothes on a mannequin. The fidelity of the renderings in the J.Crew app of the clothes on the mannequin aren't really all that clear. So it's not the best version of it, but anyways, just something out there. And then something out there that I think is a cool idea. And related to that, the Gucci app, which a number of other Apple pundits in various podcasts and things have mentioned this, and it's actually really cool. There's a really great intro video about the new creative director for Gucci, and they have it's sort of a regular 16:9 widescreen video, but then they have things happening outside of the video that make it more immersive in different places. For example, when they're talking about the fashion show, there's a runway that appears around you, like a fashion runway around the screen, makes you feel like you're there. Other places where they'll change your whole room to a particular color to match the mood of whatever it is, or they have balloons or a tram car, other 3D effects. And it sounds cheesy when you hear me just say it, but if you go check it out, it actually does have a little bit of an immersive feel that I think adds to it. And then at the end, it shows you sort of a 3D showroom of some of the products from the show, like the handbag and the shoe and some other things. And it really did feel like at the end of it that I was actually there were good 3D renders, and it felt like I was maybe standing outside of a store window looking at the product. I mean, it was not rendered as a store window. It was just the product on a little showcase pedestal. But it gave me that sense of I'm out somewhere shopping. I don't shop at Gucci, but you get what I'm saying. You're out near a store and you happen to look through the window and there's the shoe, and kind of gave you that life sense. Spatial personas I've heard are very cool. I just haven't had a chance to set up a time with one of my friends who has a Apple Vision Pro and try that, but I've heard it's really cool. I plan to. So I'm going to say hi to some of you guys in the chat, and we'll talk about some other things here. So nice to see you, Frederick, as always, regular here, and Brian as well. Nice to see you here. And James, hello from Las Vegas. Yes, the great land of CES is what I know Vegas for, but lots of cool stuff there. The Formula One race as well. Modern Day Tech Eric, nice to see you here. Another great smart home YouTube channel out there to check out. And then Justin, hello from Southeast Wisconsin. Yes, nice to see you here. Yes, I've been talking about, Frederick, good question. I've been talking about Ubiquiti sensors. Or I've been talking about Ubiquiti. Do I use Ubiquiti sensors? No. Yeah, I just haven't had a need to. I mean, we'll see. But I've mostly, I just use their Wi-Fi. I've tried their telephone service, as I previously discussed on live streams, and I don't really use it, so I don't have it anymore. The reason I stopped Ubiquiti telephone service is I was having some technical difficulties with it with my internet service provider, but which is Comcast, Xfinity, and then I also use their Protect PoE cameras, which are great, but I haven't used any of their sensors. I haven't used their key entry system. Give my family all ID badges they have to wear around their neck and badge into different rooms in the house. That could be fun. So yes, hello from Portugal, JP Olive. Thanks for joining us in the evening over there. Saul, another regular. Good to see you here. Rich, hello from England. Good to see you here. And related to those sensors, there's a couple other things that I wanted to mention. about sensors. One is that, so I did a review earlier this week of the Aqara motion sensor, which maybe you've seen by this point. And one thing I forgot to mention in that video is the light sensor on it, which is something that's in this motion sensor, which is pretty handy. So you can use the light sensor to detect, only turn on the lights when there's motion. If the light level is below a certain amount, so if the room is dark, then turn on the lights. And that can be a nice way to handle that. I found in general across Apple home sensors of different brands, sometimes those lux values are a little tricky to dial into exactly what the light level you'd want to have for a particular room makes sense to have. So it can take some practice, I guess you could say, or iteration to like find the proper value for your particular sensor in your particular room of how many lux makes sense or whatever of greater than or less than. But yeah, because I wasn't using it in that sensor when I was when I made that video. So I forgot to mention that feature. It's cool and is I think a new thing with the Matter one. I don't think the previous Aqara motion sensor had a light sensor in it. I'm going to double check that here really quick. Yeah, I don't think it did. But then if we go to the Office one, then this does for the occupancy. Someone, yeah. All right. Or am I getting it wrong? Because, yeah, no, here it is. Yes, the light sensor is here for the new one. Yeah, good for a minute. I thought I was crazy there. So I'm getting 342 lux in here right now in the office. I should have set up a way to screen share this to the live stream, but we're going a little bit off the cuff today without as much setup. So Ubiquiti sensors do a lot of things in one sensor, but it is Bluetooth and has no it has to be able to access Ubiquiti access point. Interesting. Yeah, so it'd have to be in Bluetooth range of a Ubiquiti access point. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of what's driven me away from that is just the lack of support for Apple Home in a lot of those cases. I mean, yes, you can get certain things from Ubiquiti into Apple Home. I just find them to be good products in general. I don't use anything, as we talked about last week, to bridge Ubiquiti cameras into Apple Home or otherwise, with sensors. And so pretty much all my automation is in Apple Home. We've talked about in previous live streams, Home Assistant or using things like the Homey Pro, which is sort of a more, I guess you could say like prepackaged premium alternative, completely developed by a single company, alternative to Home Assistant. But I just I check those things out because I should for my channel, but and occasionally I'll get excited about it for one automation, but I just have trouble getting really excited overall in the long run about those kinds of boxes, just because I just tend to like to keep my automation simple and in Apple Home. And I don't want to have to be thinking through all these different random edge cases about, well, what if this is true and this is true and it's before noon at this time? Then that means that if it's in away mode, it's going to do, all of that debugging for why is this sensor or why is this light coming on when it shouldn't, or why is this automation happening when it shouldn't? I just don't want all those levels of complexity. And I think a lot of people out there, it's probably serves them better to avoid those levels of complexity. So yeah, I mean, eventually I'll probably talk about Homey Pro and Home Assistant on my channel, but I have trouble getting around to that because I'm just frankly not that interested in the big picture about those things. And I think that for most people, it's probably better to avoid. But that said, I mean, I think a lot of the folks who show up for the live stream, here you're probably pretty advanced smart home users, and maybe folks who are feel sort of a lacking of features in the Apple home space and then want to go to those platforms because they do give you more. Yeah, some good questions here. Let's go through some of them. And hello from India. Wow, it's very early in the morning there, I guess, Vamshi. Do you know why Apple doesn't support NFC payments in India while Google and Samsung are on the way in that space? Seems like an obvious choice considering their market size. Yeah. Good question. I imagine, there's something related to that with the Apple DOJ lawsuit right now, where the Department of Justice in the United States is alleging that Apple hasn't been open enough with their NFC standard on their phones. However, and this I think plays into it because if you're using payments with NFC on an Apple device, it's Apple Pay. And I think from my understanding with Apple Pay transactions, there's a handful of things that Apple is doing custom to sort of make that transaction happen, where they're randomizing your credit card number. So the merchant doesn't see your true credit card number. And then they're also doing some of, I think, the fraud and liability for that particular transaction, so that then, they're also then taking a percentage of that transaction, a small percentage of that transaction in countries where Apple Pay is supported. So I don't know if Apple Pay is in India, but I imagine that it would be sort of like Apple hasn't set up all the banks and everything to do Apple Pay in India, and it probably, at least when it came here in the US, it was like a handful of the big banks got Apple Pay first. Now pretty much everybody has Apple Pay. We'll see, maybe with various, pressure from the EU and US and maybe other world governments to pressure on Apple to open up some of these standards. Maybe we'll see other things come in. But yeah, it's, NFC, by the way, you can use it for payments, as Vamshi's mentioning, but you can also, it can be a really great tool for automation in your home, as well as around, wherever, because you can tap your phone to those little NFC stickers and then use that to run a shortcut on your phone via the personal automation feature in the Shortcuts app. So definitely something to check out if you haven't already. There's a lot of YouTube videos out there. And it's not, again, not for payments, but you can set an Apple Home scene. You can, do all, message, have it send somebody a message, have it sort of like, turn on your alarm by your bedside table or whatever. So there can be a lot of fun things with NFC tags. And it's actually something like that I haven't thought about a lot recently because it hasn't been sort of top of the news conversation around Apple. It's kind of a feature they rolled out a while ago, but it still is a great feature. And I've just been thinking right now, it's like, oh, I should go back to like having one of those on my bedside table and using it for like a bedtime routine where I tap my phone there and it like triggers my alarm and my good night stuff. And then I don't have to open up my phone to do all that. I just tap my phone on the bedside table and then it takes care of everything for me. And maybe gives me a menu of alarm times. Yeah, something I need to set up that I haven't, like various iterations of bedtime routines have left that in the dust, and I should go back to that because it's pretty cool idea. So some other good questions here coming in. Thing I had is that we need Apple TV or HomePod to be a home hub, but still there isn't a home app for the Apple TV like the iPhone. Yeah, that's a good point. You can still get to some of the home app functionality under the control center in Apple TV, and it's one of those kind of hidden features. I don't have an Apple TV remote around me right now, but like you can hold down on the TV button and then it brings in Control Center. And then from there, you can get to the cameras and you can also get to all your accessories. Now, you're right. It's not a proper app. And I think there'd be it's nice usability, just like you open up an app and you see it there. And especially given that it's potentially at the core of your smart home already, being a home hub. I would love to see that on Apple TV. But yeah, it's not there right now. JP Olive, good point. The other thing to keep in mind with Apple TV if we're using it with Apple Home, two things. One is, and this applies to pretty much anybody here, but two tips is, One is that you can use the microphone on your remote to ask Siri to do things. So, and that can actually be a very fast response. Oh, good. I said that, and now my devices are waking up. You can ask your favorite Apple Assistant to do things with that microphone on the Apple TV remote. And then the other thing that you can also do to control Apple Home from your Apple TV, or use your favorite Apple voice assistant to control your Apple TV. So a little bit of reverse of this is you can ask any HomePod or any voice assistant in your house of Apple's to pause the Apple TV or turn it off. And this is a lifesaver with children, because sometimes we'll have the kids watching something on the TV, and we'll, I'll be somewhere else in the house, let's say over in the kitchen or the dining room, there over in the living room. I'm getting dinner on the table or something, and then I can just tell the HomePod to pause the Apple TV or to turn it off. And it doesn't matter what app they're in. I mean, at least the different apps that we've used, it always works to just tell it to pause it. I think it's the same as hitting the remote button on your phone. And then you can also have it turn off the Apple TV. And if you have a relatively recent TV that has the HDMI CEC setup, of course, then if the Apple TV turns off, it'll turn off the TV as well. So you don't have to go over to the TV, pause it, turn it off. You just tell your HomePod or your iPhone or Apple Watch or whatever to pause the living room Apple TV or whatever. It does it. And, then you can go on with whatever's next in your day. So if you have other people in your family, likely smaller people watching television, that can be a helpful thing with Apple TV as well to do. Oh, yes. Good point bringing that up. Yeah, and that's a good point about Home Assistant. Home Assistant does offer some nice hooks, speaking of Apple TV, into Apple TV. That Smart Home Solver had a video number of, I guess it was about a month and a half ago now on Apple TV, where he made it so his lights in his living room change whenever he launches a particular app on Apple TV. So if you're watching, let's say, a television, like YouTube TV, it'll have more bright lights. But if you turn on a movie in another app, then it's going to dim the lights more. So I personally don't have that consistent of a viewing pattern where it's like I'm always watching this app in this mode and this app in this mode. But I could see how that could be really nice. And you're right. I mean, having those triggers, then you could do something like what we were just talking about, like, well, when I turn off the Apple TV around these times of days when it would be dinner time, and these other things are true in my smart home, then turn on the dining room lights or whatever. So, there are some advantages to Home Assistant and or Homey Pro in those cases, but I'm just like mentioning that, like, I just don't see all of that being worth the trouble. I'd rather just have a button on my wall to set that scene and have it do that for me, whether that's triggering shortcuts to my phone with a flick button or whether it's, more like, let's say a button in Apple Home and doing automations there. I think buttons are I think so many people think that a smart home needs to be, they have motion sensors all over the house and they just walk around and lights turn on and off automatically, just perfectly. And I think way more common and way more practical version of a smart home for a lot of people is that once they have all their lights smart, they make a bunch of scenes of the different styles of lighting they want, and they just have buttons on the wall that trigger those scenes. And it's just, so you still sort of have light switches, but instead of the light switches being just on or off for a set of lights, it's like you press it, and depending on the time of day and other different variables, it does a much more dramatic and cool looking way to have lighting in that room. And then you have an easy way to turn it all off when you leave. And I think, just the concept of a light switch on the wall, changing it to a button on the wall, very practical. So that's my hot take on some of the automation. Not to say that there's not a time and place for motion sensors like I reviewed earlier this week. I think they're great for accent lighting. But again, those are, my opinions and not necessarily the right way to do things. So what are your thoughts for the future of, yes, good question related to what we were talking about earlier. Thanks, William. What are your thoughts on the future of the Starling bridge and the direction of Nest integrations? I'm not. Do they have? Did I miss any like news this week from them? Let's see. Also, another William Martinez. Nice to see you here. Yes, let's go back to this. I just want to make sure I'm looking at their blog. Did I miss any news from? I don't think I missed any news. So, yes. Yeah, I mean, I think that Starling Home Hub is still great, and so is Homebridge and Hoobs. It's just so those are two different kind of beasts. I think Starling is in a category of its own, I think, compared to Homebridge and Hoobs, because Starling is so focused on just Nest into Apple Home, and they do such a good job of the integrations there and making them seamless that I think Starling applies to a lot more people than would be willing to dive into, Homebridge or Home Assistant or Hoobs, any of the more customizable boxes around this, just because Starling makes it so simple to just, you plug in the box, you visit it with, on your web browser, you sign in with your Google account, and you add it to your Apple Home, and you're good to go. Now, yes, Apple will give you the warning that this is an unofficial Apple Home accessory, but I think it's very stable. It's proven to work well. I still use it for all my Nest Detect smoke detectors that came with this house that I still use. They were from the previous owner, and they work in Apple Home that way, and it's great. When we've had various things that have triggered the smoke alarm over the years, they trigger it in Apple Home with the alerts, just like they do from the Nest app. I think that Starling is a very good product. I think I wouldn't go for it unless you either A, have existing Nest products that you want to bring into Apple Home, or B, you have use cases that are really best served by Nest products only, exclusively, where then you want to bring in an Apple Home. For example, some of the Nest thermostats that do not support Matter work without a C-wire. So if you have a thermostat that doesn't have options for a C-wire, you might consider a Nest thermostat and then bridging it with Starling. Now, all of that setup might be, it starts to get like, well, then why don't you just have an HVAC professional look at like what it would be to run, a C-wire, or you could maybe try it yourself or something. There depends on your setup. But getting a C-wire to your thermostat might be easier than that. However, that was a circumstance that I was in for a while here, where I didn't have a C-wire in my thermostat upstairs, and so I just used the Starling Home Hub to bridge a Nest that worked without a C-wire, and it was fine. So something to consider there as well. Also, with a doorbell, we've talked about previously on these live streams, that the Nest battery operated doorbells are really good battery doorbells, and then you can get them into Apple Home with this. Now, Aqara has their battery operated native HomeKit doorbell, but it's not going to give you the same video quality and maybe performance. And if you're one of these people like myself, where like I have a Gmail address, I'm like I'm an Apple fan through and through, but I also have some of my life over in Google. Some of the Nest products are pretty nice, or Google Home, and so having this ability to bridge those can be really nice. So I would say yes, it's still worth it. I think there's going to still be products from Google that don't work quite as completely in the Apple ecosystem with Matter support, whether it has Matter support or not. So a few different layers there, a few different facets to think about. But yes, those are my thoughts right now on the Starling bridge. I just want to make sure I wasn't missing some details about their stuff, since they came out with the new HomeKit Secure Video integrations a few weeks back. I just want to make sure it wasn't like, oh, we're shutting down, or now our prices are 4 times as expensive or something. Good question, Saul. Yeah, we have a lot of questions here. I'm going to try to not spend so much time on every question so we can get to a bunch of them. And there's some good discussion, it looks like, happening in the chat around this issue and others. But yeah, let me take a quick sip of water and get to this. So, yeah, why would you want a security system in general when you can do the same thing with automations? Because and Saul, you concede a good point there, that I think the monitoring services is a key piece of this, that a lot of people like, which is basically that you can pay for a professional service to monitor the status of your home. And if there's an incident, then they can, depending on your settings or what you've allowed, they can look in on your cameras from that service and see, is the house okay? Is the house on fire? Are there, does it look like suspicious people are there? And then they can call the police on your behalf and have the police come. So if you're out of town, out of the country, whatever, you're still going to be able to have the police come in the event of something that triggers your alarm. And so that can be really valuable. But also, it can be a nice peace of mind, but I know plenty of people who don't see the value in that or don't pay for it and just, feel like they can manage their own alarm. If they get an alert on their phone, they can deal with it accordingly, and get in touch with the police or whatever. So, and one of the things I really like, by the way, I use, just quickly jump to what I'm currently using, and we talked a little bit about this last week, but I'm using the Ecobee security system with their smart thermostat premium as well as their doorbell. And one of the things I really like about that is that they are they have this practice mode feature. So you can turn on practice mode, and then that means that the monitoring just ignores your home. So if you have an alarm incident during practice mode, as you're kind of getting set up or getting used to the system, it doesn't actually call the police. So for a while, when I first had the system set up, I had it in practice mode because I didn't want to, have a malfunction of the system trigger the police coming, and we weren't going anywhere anytime soon at the time I set it up. So I thought that was a clever thing that I haven't seen in every security system that I've tried. So practice mode, very cool idea where, yes. And then, Frederick, you're saying you use Aqara. Aqara hubs show up in Apple Home as a security system. So you can use those for a security system in Apple Home. And my Ecobee security system does not show up in Apple Home. There's a lot of things you can do there with like hooks to automations, right? So like if your system has a alert or things in Apple Home, then you can change automations there. You can also change things, I think, when you arm your system or disarm your system in Apple Home, as sort of like, then like if I arm my system away, then maybe the basement light should always be off, or I always then turn on certain lights in my home near the front of my house so that it looks like I'm home, if it's after sun, if my system arms and it's after sunset, do this. So you can set up some of those kinds of things in Apple Home. Just something to keep in mind, that Aqara does that. Now, Aqara doesn't have any monitoring service with that. Although Aqara has started doing cloud video services. I do not use that. I don't recommend that because I just haven't tried it myself. But I could see a world where Aqara then starts to offer something like these professional monitoring services, because I get the sense that a lot of these security systems, it's not actually the security company themselves doing the monitoring. They contract with some company who does it for them. So you could see a world where like Aqara or some other company who makes a security system comes in and just, finds a company to do that for them. And then they set up a monthly fee thing where you pay, a subscription to Aqara or whoever, and then they pay some company to sort of take care of those services for them. And the other thing to keep in mind with monitoring is often only available in certain countries. So you might see a security system you like on YouTube, but if it's not available in your country for the monitoring service, then that changes sort of the value proposition there for you, maybe. But other than that, like, I think the thing I like about a security system, getting the original question, Saul, the thing I like about a security system more than doing it myself is just the level of integration. So if someone opens the front door and they're breaking into my house, theoretically, like, I want the connection between that door sensor and my security system and the person who's going to do something about that to be and the siren that's going to go off to be as fast as possible. And to not be that, like, oh, because my HomePod mini border router isn't responding, the thread sensor on my door then didn't recognize it. And then the siren on, some other device didn't sound, or like then playing the AirPlay version of the siren from Apple Music over my HomePods was delayed by 10 seconds because it's just the more of those things for something critical like that you can integrate into one company ships this and make sure it's is on the hook to make sure it's reliable. It just feels better to me as a setup. But it's just a calculus of, like, where do you live? How much do you prioritize a home security system and your relative, amount of money you want to spend on it? You can certainly have some version of a security system for less money, probably, with something in Apple Home. So yeah, just different trade-offs. And you could use, back to our previous conversation, you could use Home Assistant or, any other number of automation platforms to do the same kinds of things. I know that Alexa has sorry if I triggered anybody there, but the Amazon Voice Assistant has a series of like a guard mode. I haven't researched it much, but I think it's along these lines of a security system, but they're probably also trying to push you into using Ring because that's their thing. Oh, yes. And this is the other news for security systems this week, of course. I didn't bring up, but yes, Nest Secure is shutting down. So speaking of Starling Home Hub earlier, I still think Starling Home Hub and some of Google's cameras are great stuff if it's something you're into, but they are not doing a security system anymore. So, what am I thinking of using for an alarm system, or what do I recommend? So, I would say between Homebridge and Abode, specifically for you, Rain, I would go with Abode. I know I've heard Shane Watley has had good luck with Abode overall. I did not years ago. I am supposed to be trying all of that system again soon. I talked with their folks at CES, and I think they're going to send me some stuff to try with some of their upcoming, outdoor camera and some stuff. So we'll see. I haven't heard anything more on that front recently. So I hope, might be able to let you know how Abode goes. But I would say right now, between those two, I would go with Abode. I also think, myself and Jennifer Patterson-Toohey over at The Verge was mentioning good things about Ecobee's security system. I really like it. If you happen to have Ecobee's doorbell or other cameras and their, especially their smart thermostat premium, it's a really nice, just complete package. And it's not the most elaborate security system ever. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles. But for example, it doesn't have a schedule. You can't disarm or arm on a schedule. So I can't say that every morning at this time, disarm the system like I could with when I tried Ring. And I think Abode has a similar schedule. So now I can do that through a shortcut running as a personal automation on my phone for Ecobee. And because Ecobee has great shortcut integration with Apple shortcuts. So you can change the state that way, but you don't have it in Apple Home as a native security system there. And, but it's still, I find it to be just a delightfully simple security system that seems to just work so far. And I know I'm going to be trying other ones in the future, so I haven't felt a need to switch, but I still think it's a great option for people to consider. Both Abode and Ecobee do have monthly costs related to them in regards to monitoring, but you don't need to pay those. You can just use them on your own and then deal with the alerts on your own in contacting the authorities if you need to. Getting back to our earlier conversation as I'm catching up on this stuff. Yeah, Apple TV is great to control automations when in bed and in the dark. Yep, no accidental button presses. Yeah, you can talk to the remote as well. Let's see. So, yes, but you've thought about picking up some Flick buttons. Have you tried their textile attachment? Thinking of putting it on. Let's check this out. No, I haven't actually played with any of their accessories, but I would say I really like Flick buttons in general, except for their new Hub Mini has been giving me problems. So I would, if you're going to get Flick, get the Flick Hub LR and wire it into your network with Ethernet. I found the Mini Hub, which runs this button behind me, which is not operational right now because I need to go unplug and plug in the Hub Mini for the second time this week because it went down. So for what it's worth, and Flick has sent me most of the buttons that I have from them. I think I bought like a pack or two myself. But yeah, I also really like Akara's mini switch buttons. If you already have an Akara hub, I would say you might just consider just getting those if your desire is to use them in Apple HomeKit. So Brian, you know this probably already, but some other people might not. The Flick buttons can be used with Apple Home, but they can also be used to connect to your phone without a hub and trigger an Apple shortcut. So if you want to trigger a shortcut on your phone with a physical button, that could be a cool trick that you can do with Flick. And also Flick has some other integrations, like especially, it's nice with their Flick Twist. You can tie Flick Twist or their Flick buttons into Sonos or Philips Hue. If you use any of those ecosystems, you can, connect it there. Akara's buttons, though, you can use with Apple Home. And then you can use it to trigger scenes. I find the Akara buttons to be really reliable and work well with my M2 hub. So if you have an Akara hub, it's like $20-ish to get usually an Akara mini switch, as they call them. And I have one right under here on my desk to trigger the scene for like if I'm on a video call for work. And just adjust the lighting here in a little bit different way that makes it look better and lets people know with the status light outside my office that I'm in a call or a meeting or whatever. So yeah, those are buttons to consider. All right, I'm going to try and wrap up some of these questions we have. You need help with Hoobs. Oh, bummer. Since they removed the login capabilities for the Apple TV app. Yeah. I never really used them on the Apple TV except for with Starling. There's another question up here from Jay Wonder. I asked you, what are the first smart home devices you would get since moving to a new house? I'm going with the Ecobee doorbell. How do the sensor work with adjusting the temperature? Good question. Also, what is the advantage of a HomeKit router? Is this deprecated or is there a benefit? Going in reverse order. No, there is no benefit to a HomeKit router. Avoid it. It is essentially deprecated. Andrew O'Hara from Apple Insider had a post around CES. He was asking some of the router companies there who've previously had models that support HomeKit router what the deal is, like if they're going to have any more products with that. And I think someone told him that they haven't heard anything from Apple on it. So I haven't heard anything about HomeKit router being officially discontinued. I think it was kind of a weird program to begin with. I get the motivation to try and restrict some of your network activity, so that the idea is that then certain smart home devices then wouldn't be able to see everything on your network and then send that data back to their, company, so that their company could be like, oh, well, turns out 26% of our customer base has a Samsung TV or whatever. They couldn't collect that kind of data. And I just think that it's a nice idea. I would prefer to have that kind of privacy, but it often it makes for some difficult smart home scenarios where a lot of companies wouldn't have tested, well, what happens if we can't see most of the other devices on your network and we can just go to the internet? Or what happens if we can't go to the internet at all? And, yes, some of those companies have tested some of those scenarios, but how it works long term in Apple Home, in HomeKit router, with that, I find it introduces more unreliability than it helps. So just avoid it. And it's going away anyways, or probably. So yes, and you're going with the Ecobee doorbell. Cool. Yeah, I think that's a good option, to be honest. And how do the temperature sensors work? So Ecobee does smart adjusting of the temperature sensors, of your temperature based on the temperature sensors. So if you get the ones with the presence sensor, or the door sensors for the security system also have a presence sensor in them, that will figure out where people are in your homes and adjust the temperature for that zone accordingly. That has been enough for me in my small home and has worked fine. Nest had a way where you could schedule when the particular sensor was used. So you could just say to Nest, I want this sensor to control the thermostat for the entire home. I think there's a way to do that with Ecobee, but I honestly haven't needed it myself, because the intelligence on the Ecobee side has been way good enough for me. We used to have a lot of problems with the Nest being manually scheduled, because there'd be times as the weather changes, especially in the spring and the fall here in the Midwest, where it'd be really hot and then really cold, or things that, like, the schedule of, like, I want to use the upstairs in the afternoon would turn the house way too cold or hot for a particular day. So I find that just letting Ecobee sort of look at the different temperatures across the home and where people are works, I think better than doing it manually. But and I imagine there's probably a way you could do it manually, but I'm sorry, I haven't figured that out myself, because I haven't needed to. I also the other thing with the Ecobee is you can also, I like how you can just turn off a bunch of their automated temperature adjustment stuff, and you can just do, like, I just want to hold at this temperature. And I also think some of their way, anyways, but yeah, and the Ecobee doorbell, and yeah, cool. I think that's all your questions. So thank you, Jay Wonder. All the best with your new home. That's really exciting. Show up for another week, and if you have more questions. I cannot get the... Oh, yes. Resetting hoops. I have not had to do this, but that is a good question. Maybe there's someone else in the chat who can help with that, or has already helped with that, as I've just been talking your ears off over here. Oh, good to hear from Luca. I set up an abode system this evening. It's very simple and intuitive. Good to hear. Okay, so this is thank you, Brian. So I don't know if I'm misunderstanding you then, because there's, all I see in the accessories for Flick are, here, let me switch to my Safari. Screen share. All I see for the accessories for Flick are this clip. So maybe I missed some news earlier this week about something else. Like I do like the size of a button is a Flick button is very nice for where you can put it. But I don't see any other accessories. Maybe I'm missing something. So yeah. And for the Hoops question earlier, Saul has a good point in the chat that there's Hoops customer support to talk to. All right. I want to get to a couple more questions before we call it a day here. I see some good ones in the chat. And perhaps I'm missing something on the Flick button. Maybe we'll get back to that. But yeah, I mean, I think they're good. Go with, especially if you want a place where you can put a Flick button that an Aqara button would be a little bigger. It's about twice the size of a Flick button. You're using Protect standalone. Any reason you're not using Scripted or Homebridge to bring them into HomeKit? It's fine, but I don't like that added extra overhead of having another thing to maintain, another thing to fix, another thing to update the software on. It's just simpler to just use their app. I find their app to be completely like when I have a security camera, all I want to do with it is I want to see the live feed. I want to get notifications for certain events, and I want to view recording. And well, I like the convenience of Apple HomeKit Secure Video for certain cameras. I don't see that part of HomeKit Secure Video to be a huge value add, meaning like having in the Home app or having then the, like third-party apps like HomeCam to be able to view the live feed or seeing it on my Apple TV. Most of my Ubiquiti cameras are not or actually all of my Ubiquiti cameras are in places in my home where I don't care about that. So like, I don't see a huge value add for me to get those into Apple Home. I think if I had a Ubiquiti doorbell, I'd probably see a lot more value in having that in Apple Home, but I don't. And so, yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with Scripted or Homebridge. I just tend to like to use more vanilla off-the-shelf stuff that is pretty straightforward to set up and maintain. And for anybody, I can set up and maintain Homebridge or Scripted if I wanted to, but it's like there's a lot of people who would find that too daunting, and I just kind of like to sort of stick to things that like if I don't need it and I don't see a huge benefit, why put forth all that effort? I think for me personally, and then I just kind of like the concept for the channel that sort of like my smart home is built around ideas that most anybody could do, and it's not like so advanced that I'm never going to be the spectacle of a smart home that let's say the Hookup or Smart Home Solver are. Like those homes and those channels, if you've probably watched them, are just like amazing, and they spend so much time getting all these cool, do-it-yourself automation things that are really cool. That's just not kind of what I want to try to be. The busy person's smart home, if you get what I'm saying. So it's like stuff that you can set up that makes your life better, but you're not having to do a lot of like, oh, I installed this open source package on a Raspberry Pi and I'm running it on my network, and I update the software regularly. So yeah. Those are my quick thoughts on that. Oh, you can't post links. I'm sorry. Sorry, Frederick. Yeah, just for spam. I think probably some setting there. I'm going to keep that way though, just for. Yeah, I trust you, Frederick, but there's probably other people on the internet you can't trust. Although I love all my subscribers. What do you think the next big thing in smart homes will be? Time for something other than switches and lights. I think there's a couple different things here. I think, so I think that, I think there's, oh man, where do I start? I want to answer this question quickly because I don't want to just keep going on and on forever. But this brings up some really good things that I've been thinking about for some future videos. And maybe hit on these topics here and see what you guys think of them. Let me know in the chat of just ideas. But so there's some cameras that are starting to put more intelligence on the camera itself. And I think as AI and image recognition and that kind of thing, man, speaking of cameras, my camera angle is really high up today. It's like classic video chat scenario. But there are a lot of cameras out there that have on-device more intelligence now. And I think as AI improves, obviously a lot of AI is driven by the cloud these days, but you could see a world where maybe we start to see more intelligent video cameras that are able to give you more information about what actually is happening in the particular scene. The speed is important there. So AI in a lot of cases isn't very fast, but you could see where maybe like a very slimmed down image recognition model that's meant to run on custom designed silicon that can run in the camera. You know, I don't see Apple HomeKit Secure Video being the place where that happens, but you could see someone like a Eufy or an Arlo or a Ring coming out with some of those concepts and it actually being compelling enough to get people to, you know, to move the industry that direction over time. And you could see something like Apple doing that with their, you know, home hubs or something down the road, maybe for cameras that integrate with HomeKit Secure Video. So I think that's one, like, you know, smart image detection of people that are better and like how many, maybe somehow identifying things that look more suspicious than others and somehow conveying that to users. I think that's one area of growth. I think another area of growth is home automation that is smarter and easier to set up. So we hear a lot of rumors around Apple's WWDC this year being AI driven and maybe that relating to shortcuts. I would love to see it related to home automation as well. Something like where I could just ask my HomePod to every Friday at 3 p.m. turn on or let's say, you know, every Friday night at 7 p.m., turn on the backyard lights if the sun is already set, or something like that. And then it can create an automation. Now, a lot of folks here in the chat and myself could go make that automation in Apple Home today with some conditions. However, it's not necessarily easy or straightforward. And it is easier and straightforward, maybe more straightforward in other smart home platforms. But I think that kind of progression where you can use a large language model as a means to interpret what you want and then turn it into automation, I think that'll make some of this, like the practicality of like, why would I want to make my lights smart? That's another reason that would make it smart. Or you could just, like to my preference of like using scenes over automations, you could say, make a new scene for me that's called movie time and sets up my lights to something that makes sense for, you know, for my home theater. And when you do that, then it would go ahead and get everything set for what would make sense for a movie time automation. And, you know, Govey was showing off some things at CES this year around large language model interpretation around lights. And, you know, Akara was showing off similar things. I think it's a direction the industry is heading. And so we'll just kind of see where that goes. So I think that's the other big trend. The third big trend where I think things are changing in the smart home is I think that the ability of vacuuming and mopping robots is becoming very good, and the prices that they cost is coming down. Like the what you can get for, let's say, a $700 vacuum today is a lot better than it was 2 or 3 years ago. And I think with Matter, that's only going to increase the abilities you can use to command these robots to do things at certain times or in certain circumstances. And so I think, you know, as the prices become more affordable and the features become more, you know, smarter and more compelling over time, I think a lot of people just still have this idea in their head that robot vacuums are, you know, there's been a lot of discussion around the internet after Mark Gurman had those leaks about Apple's robotics plans. And a lot of people are just showing, to me, you know, as a smart home Apple person, listen to all these more just Apple focused pundits talk about stuff. I think a lot of people are not up to date on like how good robot vacuums actually are these days. And I think as more people sort of replace their old, outdated ideas of like a robot vacuum is just, this dumb thing that hunts around and gets like 50% of my crumbs, but is like, no, this is actually something I can trust to clean my house most of the time. That's a big value to people that saves them time. So I think as we see those come into matter and the prices come down on those over the next few years, I think that's really going to shift. So those are my thoughts there. Good question. I always love to talk about the future, Jason. So thank you. Blair, you've been waiting for a while. Read one of my comments a few weeks back about the home labs, Linux-based home server setups. Mentioned you were going. No, I'm sorry. I don't have any updates on that. I hope Sir Ecobee bought their Amazon switches. That's a bummer. Sorry to hear that on the Ecobee switches. I have not tried their light switches, but I've had great success with their cameras, thermostats, and door and window sensors and temperature sensors. Keep scrolling. It's below the sticker set. Okay. Oh, so are you talking about Brian? Okay, sorry, Brian. We just keep. This is like world's slowest conversation back and forth. Yes, and by the way, back to what I was just talking about the future. Completely agree, Eric from Modern Day Tech. Great point. Smart home should be becoming more of like a set it and forget it type of thing. Completely agree because it's way too high maintenance for most people to deal with. So this infrared accessory, oh, cool. So you can then use this to transmit to TVs and stereos and other devices using IR. That's cool. Is that what you're talking about? I actually didn't know that Flick had this. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I don't have a lot of infrared accessories in my home that would use this. I don't have an AV receiver or stuff, but I could see how if you did, that would be really cool. So, all right. I think we have, yes, and Flick buttons need a Flick hub. It's a good point. I was touching on that earlier, but always important to remember. And there are the Aqara buttons that need a hub. 2.0 is a brand that has some smart buttons that are matter over thread. I have had mixed results of them working for me. And I've heard mixed results from other people, but they are a matter over thread button that could work in that scenario, like no hub. So something to consider. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for joining. It's been a great live stream, and looking forward to talking about smart home tech like this, hopefully same time next week. Just looking at my schedule. Yeah, we should be able to do next week. So have a good week, and stay tuned. I got some exciting stuff coming on the channel in the meantime. Bye.